so I'll just go sit down and Good morning, war moms. But much more importantly, good morning, joyful warriors. Really? Good morning, joyful warriors. So, last night I confirmed with Tiffany. I said, Tiffany, what do you want me to talk about? And she narrowed it down nicely for me. She said, James, you can talk about anything you want. But build them up, because that's my brand. So I figured I'd talk to you about the greatest and most successful mass murderer in history.
Yeah.
That is my brand. So you guys are under attack right now. You may not know, on the other hand, I don't know if you keep up with the social media like I do, that you trended, Moms for Liberty trended on Twitter yesterday to over 60,000 tweets. Moms for Liberty is the national conversation right now. And you guys, after yesterday, we had Governor DeSantis speak, we had Nikki Haley speak, we had President Trump speak. Everything seems like it's super positive, but I know when we came in here, everybody's like, oh man, it's kind of negative, a little dark, we're under these attacks. You got this Southern poverty thing calling you names, saying that you're something, domestic, awful people. I am too. I have a profile. I'm an extremist now. You've got this whole thing, this whole, fake news media farce trying to say that you support Nazis, which is absolutely the most preposterous thing I've ever heard in my life. And there's a reason for this, and I told Tiffany this, there's a reason for this, and you all need to know this. The reason that you are under these crazy attacks, the reason the Department of Justice is naming you as domestic extremists, and terrorists, the reason that the FBI is calling some of you when you go to school board meetings, the reason that they are trying to smear you so desperately before this beautiful summit is because they know something. They know that mothers, and probably mothers alone, will do anything for their kids. And more importantly,
That's right.
Mothers will stop a revolution if it means protecting their kids.
Exactly.
That is what you are doing when you're here. That is what you're doing also when you're in the grind at the school board meetings, at your monthly chapter meetings, or more often. When you're slogging through, you've got your laundry and all these things. Tiffany's telling me, I got moms folding laundry. Dumb down your podcast. And she didn't lie, by the way. I spoke for 3 days straight. They were 4-hour sessions, back to back to back. Poor Tiffany sitting in the back, taking notes. 4 hours at a go. What you guys are slogging through is a cultural revolution. So when I said that I want to talk about the most successful mass murderer of all time, I'm talking about Mao Zedong. What is happening in America and throughout the West right now, as I told the European Union Parliament just about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I guess, is the Western cultural revolution. Mao Zedong launched a cultural revolution in 1966 to regain power. He'd actually already screwed up. He had power in 1949. I don't know, maybe a little history. I got a little bit of time. He takes over in 1949. What's the first thing Mao Zedong does in 1950 after he secures his power? October 49, 1950, he's in power. What's the first thing he does? Anybody know? Confiscate guns? No. But that was already done. 1950, he fired every teacher in China and sent them to re-education. So there would be socialist education only in China. And by 1952, every teacher in China had been re-educated. They weren't allowed back in the classrooms until after they had been re-educated. For 2 years, there was virtually no education in China because he was having all the teachers re-educated. They shut down the schools for 2 years and came back with a whole new program.
Oh,
does that sound familiar?
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, exactly.
And so in 1957, 1958, Mao was kind of at the peak of his power. And that was a traditional military coup he staged in 49. He took over at the barrel of a gun. He's now the big dictator of China, 1957. He's at the top of his game. And he launches a program that if we had anti-communist education in this country, which every one of you should be agitating for in all 50 states, you would know it's called the Great Leap Forward. We have a Great Leap backwards today called the Great Reset, which is a little ominous. He launched the Great Leap Forward, saying we're going to make China the leader in the world in productions of the things that matter. We're going to maximize steel production, we're going to maximize food production, especially the production of wheat, and we're going to mobilize our entire socialist country to do it. And it turns out that this was how communists usually do things. It was done rather poorly. He forced people to go work in the countryside, he forced farmers to melt their plows to get more steel so the numbers would look better. He forced steel workers to go work in the farms. Total catastrophe. The estimate is that 55 million people died. That is an act of mass murder, unprecedented in human history. 55 million people died. So they got a little mad at him. You think, communist dictator, he's invincible. They kicked him out of power. They made him step down in 1962. The point of the Cultural Revolution in 1966 was Mao wanted his power back. So Mao launched a second revolution, not against the sitting nationalist party, the Kuomintang that he took over previously, but against the CCP. He had his main political rival he had to get rid of in the CCP. His name was Liu Shaoqi. Had to get rid of this guy. So he starts encouraging all those students he spent 16 years indoctrinating in his schools to go out and be radical, to go out and smash the four olds, the old symbols of society, of Chinese culture. Old habits, old customs, old culture, old ways of thinking. Smash them. Go into people's homes.
Historical statues.
They have old stuff, old culture, they have pictures, they have Buddhas on the wall, they have weapons. Take it out, burn it in the street. Somebody's espousing old ideas, take them out, beat them up in the street. And he mobilized a generation of radicalized youth to get his power back. So for 2 years, this organization called the Rainbow Guard, wait, no, that's our time, Red Guard, terrorized China. Parents lived in fear, grandparents lived in fear, teachers lived in fear, professors lived in fear that their children, their students would turn on them, turn them in, drag them out and humiliate them in what famously became known as struggle sessions. What you went through last week in the lead up to the summit was a struggle session. It has a name, it has a history, it's a comprehensible thing. These humiliation sessions, struggle sessions, were meant to transform China and get its power back. Eventually, the Red Guard was so powerful, they were given actually the power to be ignored by the police. If they beat up people who had wrong political opinions or destroyed their property or seized their property or anything else, police looked the other way, sometimes helped. These radicalized youth eventually grabbed Liu Shaoqi. Pause for a second and think about what they did. This is the president of the CCP, which is a communist dictatorship. And they dragged him out into the street, and they shamed him in a struggle session, and they humiliated him, and they sent him off to the countryside to die 2 months later in misery. That was the end of 1967. About a year and a half after the Red Guard was encouraged in 66 to start doing what it did. So what did Mao do to thank his revolutionary youth? And I know that our friends, let me start now. Our countrymen outside, they're not my friends.
Yeah.
Our countrymen outside do not realize what's coming next for them if they win. Because if they win, they lose. Because what Mao Zedong said immediately after Liu Shaoqi was deposed was, the Red Guard has been useful, but it's too radical. It has become too far left. It's too dangerous. And he unleashed his old standby from the 40s, the People's Liberation Army, on the Red Guard, rounded them up, killed a bunch of them, sent them off to the countryside to die in starvation and misery. To work in labor camps, to be re-educated, not to be so radical. And that's where our woke countrymen are going to, if they succeed. So this is a moment where I want to hearken back to Julie's invocation, where we really need to be praying for our enemies. We really need to be concerned about these people. And this is why It's so important that we're joyful warriors. It's so important that we're joyful warriors. I want to talk actually about the struggle session and what they are. You got a little history now. You're like, oh no. I want to convince you also that this is what we're going through in America. But it's so important that we keep this joyful warrior attitude, that we keep this poise, that we keep the dignity that we're showing, that we showed the staff of the hotel who have treated us like gold this entire time,
yes.
despite all of this. It is so important to realize how ridiculous the people look outside by comparison unless we react badly.
Yes.
If we get back in their faces, if we accept their provocation, they have their excuse. Look, they proved it, they actually are a hate group. Look, they proved it, they actually are transphobic. Look, they proved it, they actually are racist, and it takes exactly one of you deciding to do something stupid they catch on camera, and then they have their proof, and that's it. This is the essence of the story of turning the other cheek that we read in the gospel. You slap my one cheek, go ahead, show them. Slap the other one too.
Yeah.
Show them how cool you are. It's not quite how it's phrased, but that's the gist. When we show up and are joyful warriors, when we show up and we remember who's watching, not just the fake news media in the back, I don't think they're here, I'm not President Trump. But I'm going to point just in case. My New York Times, fake news. We got your number.
The other guy running for president, he left, they followed him now.
I forgot my train of thought on that. That's awesome. So, when they run these propaganda campaigns, so what they're trying to do is to set up the stage to create a social condition that's just like what we had in communist China. Here's how Mao did his Cultural Revolution, aside from the identity politics part, which I'll come back to. Here's how he did it. This is going to feel awfully familiar, like a lot of the other stuff we had that's awfully familiar today. Here's what Mao did. He came out, and I'm got to be careful because the word's been used a lot in its proper context today. Oh yeah, I remember what I was saying. It was about the fake news media. We got to remember who's watching.
Yeah.
Always remember who's watching. What he did was he came out and said, we need unity in China. It's time for unity. It is time for unity. But we're going to have unity, he said, under a new basis because the old basis isn't working for everybody. We're going to have unity on a new basis. We just want to have a China where, he didn't say this exactly, I'm riffing. We just want to have a China where everybody feels like they belong. That's the modern parlance for this. We want unity. But the problem is we can't have unity because some of you are domestic terrorists. Some of you are transphobic. Some of you are part of the rising movement of anti-LGBTQ hate, and some of us can't feel like we belong because hate has no home here. So you have to be criticized on what amount to bogus terms. You have to be struggled in that criticism for your, not real racism, but fake racism. Systemic, they call it, whatever, fake. Fake news, fake racism. For your fake homophobia, for your fake transphobia. You have to be struggled for this so that everybody can feel like they belong, so that we can have an inclusive society on a new basis. Now, Mao had the luxury of being open about his socialism, so he said that new basis would be called socialist discipline. We will have freedom, he said, under socialist discipline. We will have a free society as long as everybody only does what they're told.
Wow.
They love the contradictions, they love the paradoxes. Accelerate the contradictions, comrades. They will make you have unity on a new basis, which we now call a sustainable and inclusive society. And if you aren't giving them the conditions where everybody, the most aggrieved grifter, the conditions where they feel included on impossible and increasingly impossible terms, you are the problem and you need to be struggled. So if you've been to a DEI training at your workplace or your school, that's what you got put through. We just want to have an inclusive workplace where everybody feels like they belong, but we have a problem with systemic racism in this country that we're going to address. That's CRT. So everybody needs to come out and confess to their racism. Everybody needs to come out and talk about it. You got to be ready to have these courageous conversations or honest history or whatever BS. This is what they say, and we're going to get people to start confessing, and we're going to get people to start talking about it. We're going to get the tears flowing in the wrong way. We're going to bully you, and if you don't want to play along, you have white fragility, which proves that you're a racist. Or you have probably straight fragility or privilege fragility or something fragility. Male fragility. There's no male fragility. I don't want to talk about it. Not here. Not in this house. And they struggled people into confessions to crimes they didn't commit. Does that sound like your week last week? Let's be unambiguous. There was nothing wrong with that newsletter. The context was clear. Everybody who's not They make people confess to false crimes, and the way that they do it is by manipulating not just them, because do you really care what the New York Times says? No. Do you really care what Salon or one of these left-wing things? I saw there's an article about you in there today. I'm sure it's great. I didn't read it. Nobody reads it. No one cares what they say. What they care about is that they build up a pressure campaign that starts to affect your friends. They're applying external pressure, like right now, for example. We're in here, we're talking, we're having a good time, where everything's all dignified and fun. They're screaming at a building. You can't even hear them. They are outside yelling at the building. That's what's happening. They are creating an external pressure campaign that doesn't mean anything until it gets in here too. And not by them infiltrating, by getting inside our heads. The struggle session works when all your friends, so what happened in Mao's prisons is they would drag you in front of a judge who accused you of a crime that you didn't commit, espionage against the Chinese people, harm against the Chinese people, harming the Chinese people, some vague thing. And they would say, what did you do? Confess. And you'd have no idea what you did. And they would tell you, well, you need to confess. We can't wrap up your case till you confess. And then they'd send you back to your cell. And your cell, you weren't alone in your cell in a Maoist prison. There were 8 other people with you. And it was those people's job to tell you how much you should want to confess. This could all be wrapped up very simply if you just apologize. You just explain why you did what you did. Oh, well, the problem is, in their words, you can't recognize your crime yet because you don't have the socialist discipline. So we're gonna have to do the work. We're gonna have to study the socialist discipline to understand, so you can recognize your crime and confess to it. In other words, so you can accept their terms and live on the new basis that Mao wanted to have. Unity followed by criticism to be on unity on a new basis. That's what he did. And so the pressure campaign from the outside is meant to crack you on the inside. And until you crack on the inside, they have nothing on you. It's actually kind of funny. They're yelling in the building. So what do you do with this? What do you do with this? How do you deal with a struggle session? Because you are going to go through a lot of them now. Did you see who spoke yesterday? They're not going to leave you alone. You have an SPLC extremist speaking to you right now. They're not going to leave you alone. They know you can stop a revolution. They know important people are paying attention to you. They know that you are the future of this country. So that, just like Tiffany says, when you do this work, which is grueling and awful and humiliating and demoralizing, that you know your children are watching, so you do it with a smile on your face. And you're raising up not the future of America in you, but in your children, that they can't have. So what do you do with a struggle session? Well, there are a few things you can actually do. If we read the literature, that they were studying people that were getting kicked out of China, out of these prisons, that were put through struggle sessions for years, and it warped all their brains. They're literally called thought reform prisons or brainwashing prisons. That's actually the Chinese call it. They're a little blunt if you don't know much about Chinese culture. They just call things what they are. This means wash brain. We're going to wash people's brains of the wrong ideology. And they study these people. So one of the things you can actually do, and this is, I think, the most important, the woke have a name for this. They know what's kind of going on for how to become activists in certain sense. They call it critical distance. The people who had kind of a scientific detachment and decided to study the experience of being struggle in a prison themselves had some of the least effect to them. So if you can take a step back and stop being personalized by it, get the emotions out of it, which is hard. I've been through them. I have a podcast, you can go listen. I got vigorously struggled when they let me back on Twitter. They really didn't want me to stay there.